the organization that takes care of our historic one-room schoolhouse. We also have community events throughout the year. This is the last of our Tuesday talks. So I'm very pleased to welcome Dr. Grover Baxley, a neighbor, a friend, a family doctor, so I think probably a lot of people here. And he will talk to us about a relevant topic, ticks and tick-borne illnesses. Thanks so much.
Some of the misprints that I saw, I graduated from Tufts Medical School, State Department undergraduate, not the graduate school. I graduated in 75, got here in 79, and I retired in January this year. I practiced internal medicine for 37 years. I had a chance to see a lot of tick problems. So I would like this to be an interactive talk. I'll ask questions and we'll see who can come up with answers. When you can't, that's when I get to shine. All right, so this is all more about ticks than you wanted to know. So let's see who knows what kind of ticks we have on the paper. Easy first.
Deer tick.
That's easy. Okay, that's the first one. That's the second one. And who reads the Cape Cod Times?
Lone Star tick.
That's the Cape Cod Times tick, right? That's right. Now, each of these ticks carry different problems. Some cross over, most don't. So I'm going to tell different little anecdotes as we go along. And first of all, distinguishing a deer tick from a dog tick from a Lone Star tick. First I'll tell a little anecdote about Lone Stars. Lone Stars are from the southeast, basically. And they have the females have a white spot in the middle of their backs. They're very obvious. They're different, too, than these guys. We were sitting out at Scraggy Neck Beach some number of years ago, in South Beach, and we were probably 8 feet from the vegetation, sitting in the sand, and I looked down, and there were like 10 ticks coming running out of the vegetation towards us. I didn't think much of it. I thought, well, I guess I'll move. So we got up and moved. That's not the way deer ticks operate. Deer ticks hang on a blade of grass or a little branch, waving their little arms, waiting for you to walk by. When you walk by, they clasp. Lone Star ticks are way more aggressive. They swarm. They will actually run to get you. The bite stings, and you may get 6 or 8 bites at a time. They're very aggressive. I don't know if what I saw on Scraggy was Lone Star, but deer ticks don't come running out of the bushes to bite anything. Those guys do. So I did wonder about that. How do you tell them apart? Deer tick from dog tick. Deer tick is also known as the black-legged tick. Dog ticks have brown legs. They all have 8 legs. Dog ticks are bigger. I haven't seen a dog tick in I don't know how long in Cape Cod. Everything's a deer tick. Everything to me seems to be a deer. Every tick that's brought to my office is a deer tick. Dog ticks are a little bit bigger. They're a little bit browner. They don't have black legs. They also, the dorsal shield on a tick, if a deer tick is shaped a little bit like this, they have a shield that comes down, if the head's here. They have a shield that comes down here that's jet black. And then the dog tick is more brown and mottled. A deer tick, this part is almost the color of this wood, whereas a dog tick is actually more the color of oak, and a dog tick is more brown and a little bit rounder. Lone Star is very obvious. It looks like a dog tick, only has a big white dot in the middle of its back. So those are the 3 ticks that we're going to deal with. Not much, some from Lone Star, but mostly Lone Star, it's going to be more theoretical, because Lone Stars have been found on Sandy Neck Beach and on the islands, I think it's named of it. So there are pockets of it, but if you look up CDC website, they show in the southeast Mass, and they're working their way up the coast all the way through Massachusetts, so we will be seeing it.
Grover, you said the female Lone Star has the white spot, so what does the male look like? And does
The male looks more like a dog tick.
And will they bite too?
I think they all bite, but it's the females that, certainly the deer ticks, it's the females that need the blood meal. The males do not. Deer ticks, about 25% of the lymphs are infected. the nymphs are infected, and about 50% of the adult females. The adult males, they don't care too much about because they don't need to bite people, they don't need blood, whereas the nymphs and the females do. Okay, so now some more anecdotes, and your plan is to guess the disease, your top
Bro, what are the little teeny ones?
deer ticks. Now, there's the tiniest deer ticks, the nymphs are the size of poppy seeds, which makes them more dangerous because you don't see them. The adult deer ticks, if you're going to catch Lyme from an adult deer tick, it's more in the winter, because they're the ones that come out in the winter on a warm day. The nymphs are the ones that are going to get you in May and June. They're about 25% infected, and they're the size of poppy seeds.
Do the nymphs automatically get the disease when they're born? Is it transmitted from the parent?
No, they have to feed on a, the larvae are rarely infected. The nymphs feed on a deer mice, a white-tailed mouse, and they get it from the mouse. Interestingly enough, the deer do not carry Lyme disease. The deer just serve as blood for the ticks. It's the white mice carry Lyme disease, but it doesn't bother them at all. They cohabitate with the Lyme bacteria, this parakeet very well. The deer don't even have it. The deer actually have something in their blood that kills it on contact. So, the only reason culling out the deer works is to just break up, it interrupts some of the food supply for the ticks, and the ticks stop that. And you can't kill all the ticks, so you go after the deer, which does work to some extent. Okay, so I'm going to give you little stories of patients I've had. We'll change the names to protect the innocent. And you can guess what it was. Now, I can talk about my brother-in-law because I wasn't his doctor. So, it's not here protected. So my sister-in-law calls me a couple of years ago and she says, my husband is very ill. He's a few years younger than I am. He's very active, he's a skier and all that sort of thing. He's very ill. He's got a high fever. He's got a headache. I said, well, and he's got shaking chills. I said, how long has this been going on? She said, oh, 5 or 6 days. She says, after the last couple of days, he doesn't make much sense. I said, is this a trick question? Are you asking what to do? She said, it got worse. Today he fell down twice. And I said, take him to the doctor. In fact, skip the doctor. Take him to the emergency room and tell them you live in the woods in Boxford. Ticks, until proven otherwise. Now, can anybody get, he ended up in the intensive care unit and survived. Anybody want to take a guess?
Babesiosis.
No, it's good. All, you know what, you can put any one of these things in this scenario pretty much and it would fit. What's the other big one on the cake? The Lyme doesn't get like that.
Begins with an L, right?
Yes.
Anaplasmosis. Okay, anaplasmosis. Anaplasmosis is very common down here. Which tick do you think does it? Deer tick. You guess deer tick almost every time. There's another one called Ehrlichia, which is in the same family, which we used to kind of think we were seeing down here, and we weren't, because Ehrlichia doesn't like deer ticks. Ehrlichia likes Lone Star tick. So until the Lone Star population gets bigger, we're not going to see much Ehrlichia around here, and we have anaplasmosis, hits hard, fevers, chills, headaches, no rash, and in the elderly or the weak, it can be very serious illness. He ended up in the intensive care unit and eventually did well. Who knows what the antibiotic is of choice? It's always the same antibiotic. Doxycycline. It's too bad we don't have the patent on this drug because I'm
Is it in the penicillin family or not?
I'm sorry?
It's not in the penicillin family.
It's a tetracycline. And it kills both of these, along with several other things.
What happened to your nephew?
He recovered, he's back to skiing. Not yet, unfortunately.
Grover, was the Lone Star in the south?
Yes, Lone Star has been, it started in the southeast, South Carolina, North Carolina, all those areas, and but it's now on the coastal east coast, all the way up, according to the CDC map, all the way up into the coast of England.
The dog we got from the shelter died.
From Berlikia? Yeah, then he might have
And he
got
was
it
from
from,
the South Pole.
he was from there, you go. That could be, that makes sense. Okay, next scenario. And this was a patient of mine here on Cape Cod, elderly gentleman who became ill in January of all months. January or a cold winter. Became quite sick, delirious, lost his blood pressure, ended up in the intensive care unit on life support, had multi-organ failure. Right there again, it could be any one of these. Say it again. Which illness?
The BCOs?
There you go. Good. The babesiosis, which tick? It's always deer tick. The babesiosis is interesting. It is a malaria-like parasite. That's a cousin of malaria. It's something called a protozoan, which is actually a one-celled organism. You're a multi-celled organism. Protozoan is a one-celled organism, but the babesiosis one-celled organism has more in common with you than it has in common with bacteria, because it has a nucleus and it has organelles and it has all this other stuff. So this is harder to kill. Anytime an organism is closer to us, like that's why fungal infections are so hard to kill. Anytime they're closer to us genetically, they're harder to kill without killing us. So this guy, this thing does not respond to doxycycline. This parasite is also carried by the deer ticks. If you're a healthy person, you might not even know you have it. And in fact, the official recommendation is if it's found on a blood smear, oh, by the way, how are these diagnosed? Both of these are diagnosed either on a blood smear or more recently with something called PCR, which is where they take some of your blood and they search for tiny bits of the DNA of the relevant bacteria. It's a very effective way to find things. But on the Cape, in the summertime, with the right scenario, you don't wait around for these tests to come back for several reasons. One, they take 3 or 4 days to come back. They're not done by us. They're done by, the blood smears are done by us, but not the PCR. And secondly, they're not always going to pick it up. They'll sometimes miss. So if you've got someone who looks like they have the flu with a headache and a temp of 103 in the middle of summertime, they get doxycycline until proven otherwise. At least in my illness, and a lot of other guys. Babesiosis is also found by blood smear. Babesiosis in a healthy person, they may not even know they have it. And in fact, the official recommendation, if you have a mild case of it, you would find it in your bloodstream, and if you're not real sick and you're a healthy young person, they wait 3 months before they bother to treat it. Wait to see if you're going to throw it off on your own. Because the drugs are malaria drugs, and they're not much fun to take. They can make you pretty sick. Now, in a more severe case, of course you're going to treat it. These parasites get into the red blood cells, and then when they propagate, they burst the red blood cell, just like malaria does. So they are bursting the red blood cells, so of course you're getting anemic. The other thing that does is start to clog up other organs. If you don't have a spleen, which is what fishes faulty red blood cells out of your circulation, you can do much worse, or if you're on immunosuppression. These can come in combination with Lyme. Lyme and babesiosis is the most common combo, but anaplasma, babesiosis, and Lyme can come in any combination, so you can have more than one. So it's reasonable to test for all, because though this one and Lyme are fixed by doxycycline, this one is not. So if you're real sick and you've got Lyme disease, but nobody's tested for this, and you've also got this, you've got a problem. So it's best to test for both.
Can it come from the same tick?
Oh,
Can it
yes.
come from the same tick?
Yes.
Yeah, because my husband had Lyme and babesiosis.
Babesiosis, yeah.
Yes.
They come from the same tick.
The same tick, so the tick is infected. Yeah.
And you don't always see the mark from the tick, right?
I'm sorry?
You don't always see the mark From the
No.
tick?
No, you don't always have to have the rash. And some people ignore the rash.
From the time you're bitten, do we have an idea how long it is before you get sick like your brother-in-law?
Yeah, it's usually 10 to 30 days. Babesiosis is the longest of the bunch. Anaplasma and Ehrlichia and Lyme are shorter, but a week to 30 days. That's why when someone says, I pulled the tick off yesterday and today I've got a rash, that's usually not Lyme. That's usually just a reaction to the tick spit in your body. At the site, like a mosquito bite gets bitten red. Tick bites will. Now, if it gets to a certain size, then you're more concerned. Okay, let's do another scenario. I got here in '79, and about 1980, 81, this woodcutter came in my office, and this guy was in his 80s, and he liked splitting wood for exercise and also for his woodcutter. And he had a thing on his leg that was this big around, that was various shades of reds and purples and clearing in the center, and I said, well, this is obvious. You have a spider bite. And I kept that guy in mind. He did fine, nothing happened. Anybody have an idea what that really was? What was that spider bite caused by? It was Lyme disease before Lyme was discovered. Lyme was first noted in 1977 in Lyme, Connecticut, and it was in a cluster of children who had arthritis, and they thought this cluster of children had juvenile rheumatoid arthritis. Why should 10 or 12 kids in the same town come down with juvenile rheumatoid arthritis? So they started working on it, and a couple of years later, in the 80s, the spirochete was isolated, Borrelia burgdorferi, if anybody cares. A guy named Alan Steer, who's still a world's expert who practices, I think he's a New England medicine, but doesn't give talks on Lyme disease because he's a target of many of the advocacy groups. He tries to stay out of it. But anyway, so that was early Lyme. Another scenario with that was, Lyme is so common, a school teacher was sent to my office by the nurse because she almost fainted going up the steps. She was a 40-year-old, somewhat overweight school teacher, and I started checking her out, and her blood pressure wasn't good, and her heart rate was really slow, and I listened to her heart, and it was going very slow. I thought, this is odd. So I did an electrocardiogram, and she was in heart block. Now, why in the world would a 40-year-old school teacher be in heart block? And it didn't look like she was having a heart attack on the electrocardiogram. Anybody think of what question to ask her next?
You've been in the woods?
You're on the right track. Had any funny rashes lately, ma'am? She says, oh yeah, she says, 2 or 3 weeks ago, I had these spots this big all over the legs. And I said, to the nice and terse, didn't you think that might have been a good time to call? So she had stage 2 Lyme, which is not just the rash. Stage 1 is the rash. Stage 2 is the big spots all over and or infecting your heart or your brain. And it had given her heart block. So off she went to the intensive care unit where she had a temporary pacemaker and a lot of ceftriaxone, and she did just fine. So that's Lyme. There's 3 stages of Lyme. That's obviously deer tick 2.
What's heart block?
Heart block, your heart is a pump, and it's got a wiring system so that it beats properly, and the 2 little first chambers go up, boom, low, and then the 2 big chambers go up, low. And that spark is carried by the wiring system, so it goes low, low, and goes synchronously, okay? If that wiring, which are nerves, of course, become inflamed or infected or damaged for a variety of reasons, they can stop conducting that beat, and your whole heart slows down at a rate of about 30 to 40. Because when that bottom 2 chambers, the big chambers, the ventricles are beating on their own, they go very slow. They go about 35. as opposed to 60 or 70. You basically did well.
Hey, Doc, you didn't mention in the symptoms, exhaustion or really being tired. Is that tied to any of these?
All
All.
Yeah.
of them. I mean, whether you've got the flu, or you've got Lyme, or you've got babesiosis, fatigue is way up there.
Yeah.
In fact, most of these descriptions, these three, start off with a flu-like illness. You know, a flu-like illness with a headache, but it's not flu season when you live on the Cape.
Do any of those potentially, like, you can get a little bit of it and then you beat it?
Oh, yes. If you test people on Nantucket, last time I looked, it's like, and these are the natives, these aren't the New Yorkers who aren't drinking very well, but like half of them or more are positive for Lyme, but they feel fine. The problem with the Lyme test is you're not culturing Lyme bacteria. You are looking for antibodies to the Lyme bacteria. And the Lyme antibody test, or the ELISA and Western blot, overlaps with a whole bunch of other stuff. Mono can give you a false positive. Heart infection, bacterial enteritis can give you a false positive. About 5 things that can. So if you test, well, let's put it this way. Let's say you go to a part of the country where there's never been found the Lyme bacteria and the spirochete in the ticks because they don't have deer ticks in the western part of the country. There are still people who test positive for Lyme. And that's impossible because there are no deer ticks there, and there's never a spirochete been found there. What it is that antibody test is cross-reacting with a whole bunch of other stuff in the environment, which makes the testing difficult and is the source of a lot of the controversy.
So if you've had Lyme's, can you develop some kind of immunity to get it again?
There are different, you can to one strain, but then you can catch strain 2 or 3 or 4 or something like that, so you can get it again. But if you have Lyme, your blood tests will remain positive forever to some extent. Just as if you have mono as a kid, which we all have, and they test you for mono, what they're testing is antibodies to mono, you'll still be positive. Now, there are some ways to differentiate it. The antibodies change a little, they drop a little, and this and that, but you can be positive indefinitely. It doesn't mean you're sick. Treated people can remain with positive tests.
The American Red Cross has added at least one or maybe all of these to their list.
Yeah, they have.
Reasons why they won't accept blood. It was my understanding that initially they did it out of caution. Are they making any headway of really knowing if someone who had babesiosis cannot give blood going forward forever? Are they get a firm answer on that?
What they'll do going forward is they'll say, if you test positive and they throw your blood out, or you tell them you have babesiosis, they say, see you later, let's see you in a year or something like that. But no, if you have an infection, for instance, if you travel to Central America, they won't let you donate blood for a year because of the various things you can pick up down there.
But I think babesiosis is right on the list. You know, they have this huge list that you check out now. I had this 5 years ago, and I was very disappointed because I was a lifelong blood donor. And I kept going back every year, trying to see if I could get back on the...
And did you test positive, or did you tell them you were positive?
Well, they didn't test me, the Falmouth Hospital.
So you told the blood people, I had babesiosis several years ago, and they
No,
said,
I saw it on their information. It said if you
Yeah.
have it,
Check it out.
check it off. And once I checked it off, they said, you're out of here.
huh, I don't know why they would do that indefinitely,
Yeah.
unless they haven't worked out a system yet. Most
I
of
mean,
these
if they
things.
keep checking off people, I don't know who's gonna be able to get blood. I mean, it's gotten harder the last 20 years, there's more and more reasons.
Yeah.
to get killed. It's too bad.
How about if you had somebody who had Lyme's and you could match them up with somebody who had already had Lyme's and had antibodies in their body? Is there any way you could like transfuse them with blood from somebody who.
Well, you know, the Lyme spirochete is very sensitive to antibiotics, so you don't have to go to transfusions. They have done that sort of thing with some ailments, but not Lyme, because they've never found a Lyme spirochete that's resistant to doxycycline or ceftriaxone, which are both easily given. So,
I wonder how many people here have had Lyme's.
probably so.
Me? Yeah. I live on the west coast, and I went to my doctor after I've been on Cape Cod, and I had the target on my back. My husband saw it. It was very, very bright, very hot. I had slight temperature, chills, and lack of appetite.
Yep.
And I went to bed, and he said, "You need to go to the doctor." I said, "No, I'll get better." And I went to my doctor, and he said, "I've seen Lyme's before. You put a magic marker around the target." And he said, "You don't have it." He said, "I'm giving you penicillin." And I said, "That won't do it."
He says, I've seen it before and you don't have it?
And I said, "Penicillin won't do it." And I called him, I think on Friday, and I said, "You got to send me to somebody who's a specialist, because I think I have Lyme's." And by then, the penicillin had taken down the target, but it hadn't killed.
Yeah. So what was his reason for thinking you didn't have it?
He'd seen it in books, and he'd seen somebody who had it, but it's on the west coast too. Northern California has a lot of
I had a patient who ended up in Vermont and with Lyme, with a rash, and I think he was in Burlington, University of Vermont. They stopped the show. I mean, everybody came in to see the rash.
Is it difficult to make a differential diagnosis between the rash from Lyme and other contact dermatitis type things that you
It can
find
be.
in the woods?
It can be.
Ivy or any other?
There's a, yes. I mean, if you get stung by a bee or, yeah, it can be. And sometimes you can think it's staph. And Lyme disease doesn't always present with this beautiful rash. Sometimes it's a vague rash that doesn't look like much of anything. If you're lucky, it's obvious. But what you do with those cases, you treat for both. Doxycycline treats staph anyway. So if it's a staph problem, my favorite antibiotic. It also treats sinus infections and pneumonia. So sometimes you use 2 antibiotics if you can't tell. You treat both sides.
What are the side effects? It sounds like it's not a pleasant drug, so what are the side effects?
Which one?
The doxy.
Ceftriaxone or doxycycline?
Doxycycline. What are the side effects when taking it?
They're not bad. Stomach, some people get a GI upset with it. You can get a bad rash if you get a lot of sun, like all the other tetracyclines. And then in the antibiotic can give you diarrhea and stuff like that. But it's not bad. I mean, it's used for acne, for goodness sakes, it can't be too serious. That's another thing to add to the list.
Is there a time frame from when you're infected and you get the antibiotic, if you don't get it within, say, such and such a time, it's too late?
Early is always better, that's for sure. But yeah, let's say you have tertiary Lyme, 3rd stage Lyme, which is the arthritis, which is usually a couple of large joints, one or 2 or 3 large joints, especially the knees, and that Lyme infection can trash your knee, just as an injury can. So it can also give you brain problems, which usually clear, but not always. Now, the Lyme arthritis and the Lyme infection is curable still at that point, most of us believe. But the damage may already be done. So you may not get totally better, certainly the knee won't get better. You know, if you've already trashed the knee. There's some evidence too that the Lyme disease sets up an autoimmune reaction in the knee and it just keeps going. Even after you kill off the Lyme, the inflammation just makes for more inflammation.
Could this disease begin help people to start losing their memory loss?
There's the whole chronic, there's the post-Lyme disease syndrome, which some people call chronic Lyme, but CDC refers to post-Lyme disease syndrome, and some people just don't get better. and they continue to suffer. And the question is, what's going on? Is this just permanent damage caused by Lyme, or is this something else? Who else reads the Cape Cod Times? Anybody see the latest theory on what it might be? There's a virus called Powassan virus, discovered in Powassan, Ontario, in the 50s. And it's also known as the deer tick virus. And deer ticks carry it. It's a flavivirus. Anybody know of another flavivirus that's in the news right now, hitting all in the big press? Zika is a flavivirus. Yep.
What does that mean?
It's just a family of viruses that are passed by a vector. A vector is the bug that gives it to you. Zika is passed by Aedes aegypti mosquitoes, and Powassan is by deer ticks. Yellow fever is another one. Dengue is another one. There's a bunch of them. West Nile, which we get around here. Now, West Nile can cause encephalitis, can cause a brain infection. That's what Powassan can do. Powassan, if you get that, you are really sick. You end up with confusion, delirium, and 5 to 10% mortality, and quite a few people end up brain damaged. There's now some thought, well, maybe some of the folks that are suffering from post-Lyme syndrome have been damaged by Powassan virus. So they're starting to look into that. Actually, I'll give you another scenario. An elderly lady of mine had Lyme, and here it was a month or two later, and she all of a sudden has a high fever, chills, fatigue, headache, and gets delirious. She ends up in the emergency room. They send out the usual tests. They put her upstairs. They put her on, Falmouth Hospital was very smart about treat for tick illness right away. They put her on doxycycline, and she got all better, but it wasn't Lyme. It was something new. Has anybody heard about this one? It's a cousin of Lyme. It just came out in the last 3 or 4 years. It's called Dorferi myelomatoi. Okay, here this thing, Borrelia myelomatoi. This thing's been hanging around who knows how long. And the same deer ticks have been carrying that. So sometimes when we think you have Lyme, well, you didn't. If your Lyme test was negative, you might have this, but we didn't know to test for it. They now know how to test for it. Luckily, it also responds to doxycycline. The first case was an 84-year-old woman who had really lost her mind to a large extent and cleared it all up with antibiotic treatment. So that's, put that one down here. We're going out of the room, start with myelomatoi. That's this guy, that's new too. This one does not have any long-term sequelae that anybody has noted. Okay, I'll give you another one, another story. It's another patient of mine who was a dog groomer. And he came to me, he's probably in his 50s. He came to me, he was very sick with pneumonia. So I put him in the intensive care unit. And he was not doing well, but treated the usual things, had him on doxycycline. I can't remember why I had him on doxycycline, that's just my favorite drug. And he grew a strange bacteria out of his bloodstream that was causing the pneumonia, also known as a bioterrorism agent. Tularemia, also known as rabbit fever. Tularemia is all over the country. Tularemia is in over 100 vertebrates, which is animals with a backbone. It's carried by over 100 vertebrates, animals with a backbone, skunks, rabbits, mice, all kinds of stuff. And over 100 invertebrates, which is fleas, ticks, flies. It can be passed by all that stuff. In our neck of the woods, though, it is passed by which tick? Dog. Oh, that's right, dog tick. Dog groomer. There you go. It comes in about, it can make you sick about 6 different ways. It's extremely virulent, which means if you are unlucky enough to inhale 3 or 4 germs, you are going to get sick. Whereas a lot of infections, you have to inhale or be exposed to a whole bunch of the germs to get past your own immune system. That's why they were looking at it, we are afraid people are looking at it as a bioterrorism agent, because if they aerosolized it and spread it out, everybody would come down with tuberculosis pneumonia, which is fatal if not caught and treated quickly. Another fun one.
Should we go on a hike?
Yeah! You want to go rolling around the bushes? Let's see what else.
What about having your yard, you see ads to have your yard sprayed?
Say that again?
I've seen many ads in the paper here to have the perimeter of your yard sprayed for ticks, to kill ticks.
If you don't leave your yard, it might be helpful, I guess, but
I mean, if you have a lot of woods around your house, would that be helpful if you had that done at the beginning of the season?
I think it's smarter to wear, if you're going to be out there in the edge, wear clothing and insect repellent.
With DEET?
Yeah, DEET in your socks up over your pants leg, and then you and your best friend or partner check each other afterwards. Does anybody notice how few deer ticks are around this year?
Yeah.
They were saying they think it might be drought. They were saying it might droughts.
I haven't seen it.
I haven't seen that. Well, let's do some other Lone Star illnesses, since we might be seeing them. There's something called starry. I've never seen it. I don't think anybody else on Cape has, because Lone Star hasn't been around here yet. It's called Southern Tick-Associated Rash Illness. Pretty strange. What's interesting about it is it looks like Lyme disease, and it's carried by the Lone Star tick. So when a Lone Star tick bites, some people get what looks somewhat like a bullseye rash of Lyme disease, but it's not Lyme disease. So the researchers have said, well, it's got to be related to Lyme disease, so they have decided it's caused by Borrelia lone stari. Isn't that clever? And they have found a Borrelia spirochete in the tick, in the Lone Star tick, that they have named Borrelia lone stari, but they have not been able to prove that the patients with the rash have that spirochete. So they haven't put it together yet. It's still treated with doxycycline. It doesn't have sequelae, it doesn't last long. Doesn't spread to other bullseye patterns. I think the confusing thing will be is if Lone Star really takes off up here, not every target lesion will be Lyme disease, but still treated the same way, so it's not that big a deal. All right, let's see, we've got a few more to go here.
Is there a blood-based blood test that you can have if you go to the doctor and you say, I'm suspicious because I'm in the woods all the time? I know that it shows the antibodies, so.
Well, the way it should be handled is you don't screen people who feel fine because you don't know what to make of it. Because if we screen a totally healthy person who has positive antibodies, what's that mean? Does that mean they used to have Lyme disease? Does that mean they had a funny reaction to mono, so they have those antibodies? What's that mean? Now, do we do it? Yeah, we do. Someone will come in and twist my arm until it falls off. Luckily, the testing is getting more sophisticated where they can be more sure that no, you don't have. The lab around here that most of us use is called Imugen, I-M-U-G-E-N. We have some very good researchers on it. I think they really lead the field in tick illnesses. And they'll run one panel for Lyme, Anaplasma, myomatoid, and babesiosis. They'll do all four.
Grover, does the tick have to be on a human for a certain amount of time before you're going to contract the disease, or can it happen instantaneously? After it bites.
Different amount of times for different illnesses. Lyme, you need probably more than 48 hours. That's why some experts say it's not the tick you see, it's the tick you don't see. Because the one you don't see managed to hang around for a few days and fall off and run away and give you Lyme disease. The one you see probably hasn't been on that long. The nymphs too, they are on for 2 days and they're tiny and they drop off and they take off, and they have a higher incidence of giving it to you than the bigger ticks, because you tend to find the bigger ticks before the 2 days are up. Now, anaplasma and babesiosis not the same time frame at all, and can be like
I had the Lyme vaccine, and I still protected. This was many years ago.
the Lyme vaccine is an interesting story. The Lyme vaccine was developed and they were dishing it out, and it seemed to have a positive effect, but a variety of people thought they had bad symptoms and sued the manufacturer for the Lyme vaccine. And then the manufacturer said, you know what, we're not selling that many of these anyway. They took it off the market.
Am I still protected?
You probably still have antibody levels, because that's the thing.
I test positive.
Yes, and you test positive. Same as if you have Lyme disease. Yeah.
No.
I had the same thing. I don't know whether there were 3 shots. We had at least 2 out of the 3.
Yeah,
About 25, 30 years ago.
I remember those.
And then they took it off, and we hike in the woods all the time. I don't check myself, but I do, tuck the socks in
Yeah.
and spray, and I haven't had anything, so I'm assuming I may have some sort of protection.
You may, but I wouldn't count. I wouldn't. I'd still tuck your socks over your pants.
Rudd, you remember, experimented with radio frequencies for killing microorganisms. And I don't know if anybody's done any work, but he did this back in the 20s and 30s and cured terminal cancer patients, about 18 of them, and AMA would kind of read up on it. But I wonder if you could use the radio frequencies, 400, 500 watts concentrated for Lyme disease or anything.
Well, where are you going to aim it?
Well, where do you think that the...
If the thing is all throughout your body,
Well, that's different.
which is what it would be. And there again, you got to say, well, what would the radio frequency do to the human body too?
Well, you want to have the frequency designed for the organisms. If it's a few microns or something, or nanometers, you really have to have the right frequency for the size of the animal. There's a couple other contingencies that go into that.
I suspect once they came up with antibiotics, which were so easy to do, that the interest dropped.
Radio frequency, if you know the frequency, you tune into that. And I've seen lists of these various diseases that respond to certain frequencies.
Interesting.
And it's really been looked into, and the AMA just doesn't even want to touch it.
Well, what they need is an investor. They don't need the AMA, they need an investor.
Well, there's so much, pharmaceutical drug makers, there's so much money around that they don't want anything to change. And this could be a shortcut. I've experimented a little bit with it, and I've tried to get some people at Harvard interested in. With these new microscopes, you can actually see the organism die. And if you kill it within a minute or two, you're onto something that's going to work pretty
It's interesting.
When you said the deer have a natural immunity to the diseases,
To Lyme, yeah.
is there any research on what that immunity is that they could develop?
It's a part of their immune system called the complement system. I mean, we have a complement system too, which is involved. It attaches and lyses, which means it bursts apart bacteria. Ours bursts apart a lot of stuff, but apparently ours doesn't burst apart Lyme's parakeets, and the deer's does, for whatever reason.
That's an upgrade.
Yeah. They may not do as well with alcohol as we do, though. I don't know. There's a payoff, I'm sure. Okay. More about Lone Star. There's another really interesting Lone Star, and I read this. I thought this has got to be copycat, but I looked at it. Lone Star ticks can make you allergic to meat.
Allergic to what?
Meat.
Meat?
How's that happen? So it turns out that Lone Star tick's belly is full of, I think it's alpha glued. I have to look at my notes to get the name of the exact carbohydrate, which is a common carbohydrate in meat. And the thought is that if you get enough bites by a Lone Star tick, you start to have a reaction to this material in their stomach. And then when you eat beef, you can actually have urticaria, you can have hives, you can even start having trouble breathing, you can become allergic to beef. If you get multiple Lone Star tick bites. That was bizarre. Well, let me see what else I've got here to give you. I've covered all my ailments. I can see in the dark. Oh, there's another one. Okay, I'll just tell you about these. These are not worth guessing on. There is something called tick paralysis. Has anybody ever heard of that? That one's very interesting. It's usually a dog tick, and it's usually a little kid. And for a couple of reasons, it's a little kid. The toxins, there's more toxins around in a little kid, a big person, and a little kid may not notice they have a tick. And it turns out the saliva of a dog tick can produce neurotoxins that can damage your nervous system. And these kids can actually become paralyzed from this tick. And when you pull the tick off, it goes away within days. That one I've never seen. Rocky Mountain spotted fever. We don't have much of that here.
Just to go back, there's a lot of controversy about how to remove a tick. That if you grab it and squeeze it, then you can inject more stuff into you. Or if you don't do it properly, you leave some of the mouth part. And so what would the proper method be?
You know, I agree with you. You can look at a dozen articles and they all remember when we were supposed to burn the back end with a match and then put the back out? I don't think they ever backed out the same way. And certainly if you've got a tick that's full of blood, I wouldn't want to squeeze that swollen abdomen of blood and shoot all that stuff back in. It'd be gross. So when people come to my office, we want to do a really slow, gentle pull and go very slowly and see if you can come away without popping the head off. And you'll know when you pull it because it makes a pop if you left the head in. Now that doesn't mean your chances of Lyme or this or that are greater with the head in, but it causes an irritation and a reaction, so I used to get that out.
Can you pull them up with tweezers, or they make
All
all
kinds of things. I tend to use a hypodermic needle and lick it out that way.
Wow.
And then if there's some routine, get that deep down, I'd say, look, I've made a enough hole, why don't you just foam and hot soak the heck out of it, hot hold this in and as you draw out.
So last time I was at the vet, you can get a pill for 3 months instead of the flea and tick collar.
Yeah.
Would they ever have it? Why don't we have it?
Every time I give my dog that pill, I wonder that. Dogs don't live as long as we do, so that's one issue. You know, if you're only going to have this poison, it's got to be poison. If you're only going to have this poison in your body 7 or 8 years, because that's as long as the dog lives, maybe it's not much of an issue as if you're going to take that pill every day for 50 years. I'm sure they haven't done testing in people. I think the main reason is we're more cavalier with dogs than we are with humans. Maybe we ought to use the rest of the college.
Yeah.
We can bring the collar, that's right.
Put the advantage in your hand.
So I think the work there, Tom. I'm actually going to see if I forgot anything here. I don't think so.
We used to use diathermy for treating ailments in the body. I just wonder if that would have any effect on ticks or anything.
Say again?
Dug in, diet for any radio frequency heating of the surface of the skin.
Oh, with the tick,
Would that?
that could,
Tick right away?
that could make them weak. Yeah, but you don't want to kill them, you want to get them off of them. That's the thing.
Really just want to-
What you want, I think the tick, when the head is embedded, I don't know if you can get it out until,
How far under the skin do they go?
that deep.
They can go over
That far.
16 of an inch.
Yeah.
8 inches. Wow.
I mean, they gotta be able to let go, because they do if you leave them there long enough, but you don't want to do that either.
If you leave them on,
They will eventually let go. Rocky Mountain spotted fever, we don't see that much up here. That is caused by a dog tick. I don't know why we don't see much over here. We don't. I've talked to a couple of the docs in the hospital who think they've seen a case. I've never seen a case. That's a very serious illness. And it acts like the rest of them. You're sick, and you've got a headache, and you've got fever. It comes with a rash. It starts on the ankles and wrists and hands and feet, and then progresses upward. The problem is, by the time you get the rash, you are pretty sick. And some people don't get the rash, and if they don't, it ends up killing most of them. It invades the lining of your blood vessels, the endothelial cells throughout your body, and it lives in those. So since it's messing up all those small blood vessels, it hits every organ in your body. So you can essentially go into multi-organ failure and die. And the whole trick is to start wet straw.
Are you passing? Yeah. We all have some of that home with us.
Speaking of pharmaceuticals, it's itching. So that still waxes and wanes, but the pharmaceutical industry plays the game with the generics too sometimes, but at least it's a generic. But yeah, early treatment or big trouble.
Well, you know, like dogs getting Rocky Mountain spotted fever.
I've heard that.
Do they get it from the deer tick or the dog tick?
Presumably the dog tick. I don't believe it's carried by a deer tick.
Right, because one of our neighbors had it.
I've heard that a couple of times in the vet community, yeah.
Most veterinarians have chemicals and things on hand to treat different types of ticks and.
Yeah, they have antibiotics they hand to you for your dog with Lyme disease or your dog with any of these things. And if you look, it's a familiar antibiotic.
They usually have that on hand. They don't have to go to the pharmacy.
No, they usually give it to you, at least ours does.
There was a case about 30 years ago here on the Cape where a woman came down Rocky Mountain, who was across the fever. And they found out that she had cancer in Colorado.
There you go.
And they thought that it was inside the sleeping bag, which you remove the sleeping bag, the air out the sleeping bag, the tic was in it. And I think she died.
It's big in the southeast too. You don't have to be it was discovered in Colorado, but it's even bigger in the southeast.
Is it kind of a mountainous area, like Leadville or?
It was in Utah, I think.
Utah?
The guy, Mr. Ricketts discovered it, and of course now it's named Rickettsy. After him. In 1906 in Utah. Southeast and south central U.S., so Texas, South Carolina, that's swamp.
The mattresses, the old mattresses, is that made for ticks if we have a dog that jumps on the bed?
And they're not going to stay there long because there's nothing, unless you lie on it, there's nothing to eat. So they'll march on. Any other questions?
Any other questions?
You mentioned vertebrates and invertebrates. How about birds? You know, I thought of this the other day. I was down the end of Bell Street, and the guy's got a parrot down there up in his backyard. And 100 years ago, I remember studying psittacosis.
Yeah.
I don't know if that looks similar, or you see any of that?
It doesn't. Psittacosis, usually in adults, is a check myself on that, but I believe it's a pneumonia. And it's not, and it's you get it from being in contact with a sick bird, not from a tick that's been on the bird. So far, they're talking about, there is some thought that the birds may be moving the ticks around though. You know, the tick's not gonna catch Lyme disease from the bird, but he's gonna get dry. So,
You know, it almost seems miraculous to me that all of us here aren't raising our hands and saying, oh, yes, I've had that. You know, because we're all having the illness all the time. It's sort of miraculous to me that more of us aren't sick.
Maybe we all are, we don't know.
No, but I wonder if they've studied, you know, the blood of the people who come down with it, whether there's a susceptibility or something.
oh, with all of us, we all have our own susceptibilities, and yeah, there's plenty of people who beat these things on their own.
Yeah.
And then test positive later, after they've already gotten over it. But babesiosis in particular, a healthy young person doesn't know they have necessarily. They just basically get rid of it.
Somebody asked me the other day, about their bird feeders. Should they
About their-
take out their bird feeders? Get rid of their bird feeders, because they're worried about the rodents being attracted, eating the bird feed, the birds. Because it's still not, and possibly attracting rodents that have ticks that could affect the dog.
There was an article on that, I think it was in the Cape Cod Times, and this guy was saying, why do people have bird feeders in the summer? And I thought, duh, to see the birds. Is this a trick question? I mean, I'm not doing it because I just think they're starving, and I like looking at the birds.
I told them I didn't think it made any difference.
But I did go outside and look to see if I saw the raffles, that I've been calling chipmunks. I think they're chipmunks. Yeah, that was the rat infestation down the Cape a little bit. They were talking about.
Are the white-tailed mice the ones that come in the winter?
I'm sorry?
Are the white-tailed mice the ones that come into the house?
No. No, they're not. The ones you get in a house are just field mice. They're not quite the material stuff.
Is the incidence of Lyme disease especially prevalent in the Cape in this area?
Sky high. We're Westchester, New York, and here we're off the mark, off the charts. Yeah, everybody in general practice down here is quite the expert in Lyme. It's a lot of exposure. Yeah, I probably saw 5 or 7 cases a year, most of them in the summer. A lot of it. Now, usually, it's the early stages. And, you know, with the rash, one young fellow was one of my son's friends, and they keep him off Cape, up in Vermont or something, and they're treating him for strep throat. And he wasn't getting better, so he came in to see me, and I looked at him, and I thought, there's something funny about this. And he's all red and swollen. And I sort of backed up further, and I go, as I back up, this is a bullseye that goes like this. And what they thought was just throat swelling from strep throat was this big old bullseye. And he had Lyme, and they looked at it. But most of the cases I have seen over the years have been that stage, that early stage, which is what I was wondering.
How easy is it, how hard it is to get rid of Lyme, which is in your blood, all through your body? Is that pretty hard to do?
It depends on where it is. If it's in your heart or your nervous system, you're going to get a lot more treatment than if it's in your skin. When it's all over your body in those big patches, it's in your bloodstream. But that's still treated easily if you're not too sick with oral doxycycline as an outpatient.
Oral,
Doxycycline by mouth as an outpatient. Now, if it's in your heart and you've got heart block or you've got meningitis, nobody's going to fool around with that. You're going to be in the hospital getting intravenous ceftriaxone, and you'll get a month's worth.
Well, with the home treatment, what do they use?
It's a pill.
Just a pill?
Pill twice a day.
And how many months would it take?
Oh, no, 10 days, 10 to 14 days. 14 is, early Lyme you can do 10 days, most people do 14. Real mild cases I do 10. If you have other reasons to treat.
If it's in your blood, well, the blood's going to go through your heart, so maybe it doesn't do all the damage.
It goes all over the place, but so does the antibiotic. If it's not so heavily in your heart that it's causing obvious heart problems, but sure, when someone comes in with Lyme, and I don't know where every last germ is. You know, they could have a few germs here, a few germs there. But if it's early in the course, the doc cycling seems to be good.
The last question, Barry, did you have a question?
No, thanks.
I want,
Grover, do we know what causes the rash, you know, that circle, the bullseye?
It's the bacteria multiplying and spreading out from the epicenter, which is the brain. That's gross. Lots and lots of spirochetes going out. You can biopsy the edge of that rash, and it's very hard organism to culture. So it's basically only done in research settings. But yeah, that's one of the places they go to get a piece to culture.
well, thank you so much.